Hello, great souls. Welcome to our Monday Satsang Talk, Reflections on Autobiography of a Yogi. Let's take a moment to begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and beloved Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda. We humbly bow to you now. Guide us in our time together. Help us to dive deeply, to hear the teachings that are coming to us and for us today, to apply these with wisdom to our journey and to awaken to our own inner divine light. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, so we are still in the Master's Hermitage, Yogananda, in the Hermitage with Sri Yukteswar. And as I was going through and looking, there are so many pearls in this chapter. I think I'm going to nudge myself beyond it for next week. But we'll just finish up with the chapter today. Obviously, we can't cover everything that's in it. I'm realizing more than any other chapter I've encountered thus far, wow, a whole course could be spent on the pearls that are in his experience in the ashram and all the different things that happened, the many things that he learned. I think I've said this before, but it really does remind me, and as I say it, it seems so obvious, but I'd never thought of it before, of the stories that Swami Kriyananda has told of his time in the ashram with Yogananda. Part of what stands out to me is even something that seems mundane holds information, it holds a teaching in it. I'm thinking now of a story that Asha told of being with Swami Kriyananda. She was visiting him, she was a secretary for him for many years, and I believe it was in that role that she happened to be seeing him in the afternoon. Every afternoon she and a few others would see him. She would bring the mail and they would have time together, and then in the evening they often had tea. And so one day she was there with him, and he was making his lunch. So I think some of the details don't matter. This is the point. This is what she tuned into and experienced, and it was revelatory for her that here Swami was making lunch, just very calmly going about doing that, and she could see that he was in such a state of spiritual attunement that it was as though she was observing his sadhana. So when we say sadhana in yoga, that means spiritual practice. Very often we refer to our meditation as our sadhana practice, or yoga postures, pranayama, and each person puts together their own practice of what sadhana means. But it's a very deep practice for inner communion. And she could see that there was no difference in his making lunch with anything else that he does, including leading a sadhana. He was experiencing inner communion. And that was quite a moment for her. So back to this idea that every moment when you're with a master or someone, in Swami Kriyananda's case, is understood that he was a jivan mukta. And so that's free while living. That's what a jivan mukta means. A jivan mukta still has karma to work out, and it is said that they can choose where to work out that karma because they're free. And the freedom is a freedom of self-realization, an understanding of our identity as a divine self. that our identity is rooted in our soul nature. And when that is firmly established, we awaken to a state of freedom that has the word that comes to mind, and I can't think of a better one, and it might be the right one, is permanence. So when you're a Jivan Mukta, you aren't all the way liberated as a master would be. So we get to a point here, Asha talks about something being above her pay grade, where the refinement of the teachings, I can only share them with you. I really cannot speak with authority on these differences, but I will share with you my understanding of them. So a Jivan Mukta, I'll say something else about that that's interesting, but let me just stay with Swami Kriyananda being freed. So he had that state, and those who lived with him and worked with him, Asha's one of them, so because I live in the Palo Alto community, I'm around her, so I hear more of these stories from her. He had a way of, just as I was telling the story about making lunch, where if you kind of had to be with him to notice this, that because as Swami spoke of Yogananda, it's very easy to see the personality, or what, in Swami's case, I will say the personality. But I'm going to say with Yogananda too, like they inhabit a body. He's a free master, so he's completely self-realized. He's in a body, he has a personality, it's animated, but he is not that. So that's very, very true of Yogananda. Well, Swami didn't live in his personality either. He didn't live in the role of Kriyananda. He said about that role, it is an event for which I am responsible. I think he either said event or role for which I am responsible. In no way did he identify himself as the role. He engaged with it in a very committed and dedicated way. Right? So he recognized he had a responsibility for the spiritual well-being of many people. That was part of the work that he was called to do. And also, so the running of Ananda, one of the reasons he said that he kept up on the news and world events is because he was a leader of a large organization that was in the world. And it would not be appropriate for him to not know what was going on. He needed to have that information to consider with decisions that were made. Now, he was making decisions from intuition and divine guidance, and there was so much to what he did. It was extraordinary, really. But this idea of living in the ashram and what we experience in the ashram, I don't know if stepping it down is quite the right way to say it. I don't have a better way of saying it right now. But I live in an ashram here in Palo Alto. And so, I really do feel, I mean this sincerely, that I live with saints, certainly saintly people. Certainly saintly people. And to live among others who are dedicated to the spiritual life is, well, it's been a blessing for my consciousness and my life in a way that is difficult to put into words, because it's so inward, the experience. It's just, I was talking with a friend recently about moving into the community, trying to decide if it's the right choice, and that we were chatting about it. And it's interesting, it's not I think for some, it might be a really easy decision, that they have the thought, they move in, there's nothing more about it. And they could experience as big of a transformation, there's no reason to think they wouldn't, of their consciousness, as both my husband James and I feel like we are continually experiencing. It's become so precious to us. And Asha said to me in a conversation about our moving in, it took us a long time to discern that, is what I want to say. So as much as it felt like a very good idea, there were things in our life and in our journey and in our karma that we needed to finish before moving into the ashram. Devi, a number of years ago, so Jyotish and Devi are the spiritual directors of Ananda Worldwide. James and I were in a class that she and Jyotish were giving. And afterwards, the four of us were talking, just kind of walking and talking after the class. And Devi said to me that she had the distinct feeling that I had lived many lives in monasteries. And that in this life, I needed to, I don't know if she used the word finish things in the world, but it was along those lines. And she shared with me that a teaching of a saint, a female saint, I don't remember her name, from India, whose the classic phrase is that it's better to be in the world longing for the ashram than in the ashram longing for the world. Much better to be where you are, longing to develop and grow spiritually and take a particular step, than to have taken that step before it's right for you. And then keep looking back, keep feeling like, oh, I gave something up. I didn't finish something I needed to finish. And what I can say for James and I, that really felt true. It felt completely honoring of our reality. I also had the sense, because I loved monasteries. And a good friend of mine used to say, well, it's because you just spent so many lifetimes in them. I didn't know at the time. That was before I was on the path of yoga. I still can't say I don't have a conscious memory of it, but I do have an incredible affinity. It feels like home. It really does feel like home for me. And it's, there's just monasteries, ashrams, there's something about them. They're so comforting to my soul. So it feels very, very familiar and at home. And so for us, it took us a while, right? And when it was clear, when it was the right moment, it was exactly the right moment. We moved in and it was just, it's been a complete joy and blessing ever since. And that being true, I was writing, I think it might have been the same friend who I've been talking about the community with. I was saying to them that, it's really the ordinary moments that stand out to me in terms of the effect it's having on my consciousness and my spiritual life. This idea of the mundane. So I'm reminded of a story Swami Kriyananda said about being with Master. He was in the room with Yogananda. Yogananda was talking to a group of devotees about something very mundane. So Swami just kind of knew it didn't have anything to do with him. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to be there. So he didn't pay any attention to what was being said. And then suddenly he realized his consciousness was being profoundly uplifted. And he could tell, oh, it isn't what's being said that's most important here. That's not why my consciousness is changing. It's not the words that are being spoken. It's the vibration and the consciousness behind those words, which is a core teaching of yoga. Vibration. Consciousness is vibration. And it's the vibration we tune into. It's so subtle, it's not always easy to talk about. But many of us have had the experience of walking into a space and it feeling good. As I was saying a moment ago, sometimes it feels familiar, but there's another experience where you feel in some way uplifted and expanded in the space. And you can look around and it might be beautiful. It might be that. It's been my experience that it's more than that. It's more than that. So that is my experience living in the ashram here. We live in an urban ashram. We're it's right along the line of Palo Alto and Mountain View. Our temple is in Palo Alto. Our community is in Mountain View. We're just about 8 miles away from each other. And the vibration of the community, while there are aspects of it very, very beautiful, it's a very humble place. It's a very humble dwelling. There's nothing spectacular. It's an apartment complex. It's a nice apartment complex. It's, that's kind of, if I'm looking at it in a material realm, boy, I don't know. I mean, the grounds are beautiful, But that's not what's so meaningful about it. It is, I feel that the soil has been saturated with devotion and prayer and aspiration and love and divine friendship. It has been saturated, and I feel it when I walk the grounds. I feel it just living in we have a 1-bedroom, we're a little humble abode. It's just, it's simple. It's nice enough. I feel like I really do like nice things, and so I appreciate that I can make the space nice. And so looking at what it is to live in an ashram, what it is to live around, we call it satsang, that's why these talks are satsang. It's being with others who are spiritually inclined, seeking truth. And there are the various ways in which we can do that. So Yogananda living with his guru, Swami Kriyananda living with his guru, Asha living with her guru, with Swami. And for me, I feel I'm living with my spiritual teachers and my divine friends, and with the blessing of the masters, to make my life a sadhana. That is the intention now for me, very, very clearly, maybe more than it's ever been. I could imagine if you asked me 10 years ago, would I like that? I could sure imagine saying yes, but there's something like a focal point of the timing. And perhaps, maybe more than perhaps, because of the environment I'm in, it feels very doable. Right? That's one of the things that is refreshing and filled with hope and promise. It's not far away, right? Now, it's a practice, I would say. It's a practice. It's not automatic to hold every moment as sadhana, but it's close. So it's a practice. It's not automatic. But I'm surrounded by people who seem to be, even if they wouldn't articulate it in that way, they're doing enough that feels like that. It feels like that's what they're doing. And what I find is that I often go out on our green area, which is very beautiful and peaceful. And it's lovely to be in a place where I can read spiritual books, I can meditate, I can sing sacred chants, and hear my friends, quietly walking, and people just give each other so much space because, again, vibration, there's a sense of tuning in. Where is someone? What do they need? So we interact with each other, but there's always a sense of, I'll go back to something, Devi again comes to mind, where she talked about a certain quality of reserve, and I could also call it autonomy. Kriyananda talked about standing on your own 2 feet. So there's this balance between community, connection, friendship, and also being very strong within yourself and committed to your journey. So let me see if there's anything else to share about. There's a little bit more time, so let me kind of tune into this experience of, I'll go back to the mundane. I'll go back to the ordinary. Ordinary sounds a little bit better than mundane, but I think this is where the gifts can be. One of the practices that I find very useful, someone was asking me recently about how do I cultivate inner communion. And there's the classic way, which I mentioned earlier, of meditation, and in this path in particular, it's considered the supreme practice, is the jewel of all our practices, is the practice of meditation. So I need to say that's very important. And within that, the practice of Kriya Yoga, which Yogananda brought to the West, an incredible blessing and tool for awakening. So there's that. And then, but what this student was asking is beyond that. They were really asking, How do you live in such a way that helps you to stay open to divine grace? And I shared with her one of my practices. I don't remember how I learned it or where it came from, but it's been with me a long time now, which is, it's a little bit, Yogananda, one of his from Whispers from Eternity, there's one of them about a playmate, God as playmate. And that's always been very dear to me. There's something in our prayer that we started with today. It's a prayer that Yogananda taught us. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved, God. Yogananda said these are each ways, not the only ways, but these are pathways of connection with the divine. And within us, we will have an affinity. We may have an affinity for, which is fine, to go with. It might be father, it might be mother, it might be friend. He did say that friend is unique in the way that with a true friend, nothing is expected. And there's a sense of freedom in the relationship, where family, a familial relationship, it can be really beautiful and perfect, but it can also come with a sense of obligation, there can be a burden within it. Whereas with friend, a true friend, there isn't. There's a statement from the Christian Bible, the Gospel, where Jesus said, you call me teacher, you call me rabbi, I call you friend. And it has always reminded me of this same teaching. So God as friend has been a way that speaks to me. It's been something that really works for me. So I like to play, it's like hide and seek with God. And I just look for God all day. I'm always looking. So certain things will happen, synchronistic events. That can be a way where I say, oh, there's God showing up. Oftentimes in nature, I will see something and just feel God's presence. It is our teaching that God is in everything, so God's everywhere. There's not really hiding. But there's something dear about the game. So each time I see something and I feel reminded, a beautiful breeze, a soft breeze, a songbird singing, a friend calling or reaching out, it's a way that helps me to open and receive the blessings that are here. And that's part of the practice. In our Sunday service yesterday, in the reading, it was talking about the learning how to identify with our soul nature versus our ego identity. And in the reading, Swami said that oftentimes we get confused. And let me back up a tiny bit and say this. Yogananda said the ego is our own soul, so it's part of us as our ego, but it's identified with the material realm. That's ego consciousness. So in ego consciousness, I think I am my body. I think what's happening to my body is happening to me. We do think that and that's agreed upon in the worldly consciousness. But in yoga, we say, I'm not the body, right? I'm experiencing what's happening in the body. This is happening to the body that I'm in. But I am a soul, right? We are, and so the reading yesterday, we are children of the light, and it's a focus of our divine light. Yogananda said when he looked out at his students, all he saw was light. He said, if you could only see yourself as I see you. And that's what the masters come to teach us, is who we really are. Right? What is our true nature? So let's see if I can track this back to what I was saying about identity and soul nature. I'm not sure if I will remember. Sorry, I was going somewhere with that. So the game of hide and seek, I don't remember. Now I remember. So Swami was saying, I don't know why I was saying this, but I'll just finish it, which is, he was saying that when the body is ill, it's easy to be confused and think that we're ill. If financially we're struggling, often people will say, I am poor. When the deeper reality is that I'm living in circumstances, I might be living in circumstances of financial difficulty or poverty, but I as a soul, am wealthy. And this is a deeper truth, a deeper reality. I think if the best I could do in this moment to bring all of this together, I'm not sure why I was mentioning that, but this, when we are, the theme today, I feel like, is making our life a sadhana and recognizing that relationship with the masters, whether we're living in an ashram, living outside an ashram, but tuning into talks and reading books, taking our next step, the step that helps us to see our true nature as divine souls and to experience that more and more. I'm reminded just now that my student had asked me, how do you cultivate inner communion? And so I was sharing with her this practice of looking for God everywhere. Let's see if there's anything else. I just take a moment to center myself and see any other jewel to share. I'm not sure. I think the essence of the teaching today is that certain environments and certain situations help us to expand our spiritual life into every part of our life, into every day. And what I would say, again, wherever you're living, maybe ask yourself the question, how do you cultivate this sense of connection with the divine? And what are the things in your life that support that for you? Yeah, I think that will be where we end today, is your own sense of how are you tending to your spiritual life and your environment, because this is so much of the experience of being in the ashram, is the environment, the spiritual vibration. And we'll end with that today. It's so good to be with you, great souls. Wishing you a beautiful week.